Hello, everybody. I'm your host, Zenitsu, and you're listening to the Digi Talks podcast, the show that covers various topics from news to meta developments and everything in between for the fine folks who love the Digimon trading card game. Just as a quick reminder, I do stream this live over at twitch.tv/Zenitsu, and it also gets uploaded as a YouTube video under the YouTube channel as Zenitsu, as well as being up on various podcasting platforms like Spotify for your viewing and listening pleasure. Today, I'm with my co-host Teddy again, and we're going to be talking about BT13 in retrospective or recapping it. Basically, we're just going to put a bow on closing the chapter that is BT13 in Digimon's life, and we're also going to transition into what we're looking forward to and be most excited out of what is to come in BT14, along with our expectations. So there was a regional that happened, but let me refresh the page and see that it is not there. Yes, so there was a regional to end off BT13, but we don't have that information yet. So we're just going to skip it because I don't really think it's going to change the numbers that much, because I did a whole bunch of data crunching and I just gathered all of the BT13 data that we had from the competitive side of things. I'm not counting Ultimate Cups, and it is a really interesting format. There has been 18 total events. I have data for 17 of these events, and the span of this feels like very long because it has touched 5 different months, even though there was only realistically about 4 months of actual competitive play. As far as like the touching aspect, that's where this format feels a little bit longer because we got it at the tail end of July, and now it is ending mid-November. So that is a long time to see a format. It's not the first time we've seen this happen. I don't think the last time we had 17 events though. Uh,
No,
so so instead,
definitely not.
yeah. So instead, I'm just going to be going over the numbers. As far as tier list breakdowns, I know you can't visibly see them, but I do have descriptors on what I define as competitive tier list. Basically, anything that is tier 1 has 15% meta share or above. Tier 2 is going to be 6% to 15%. Tier 3 is going to be 2% to 5%. And then rogue is anything that's 1% or below. So that's kind of how I separate my tier list as far as what actually is top tier. We have the top 8 decks, which is in tier 1, Shine Greymon at 26%, Hunters at 11% starting tier 2. Continuing into tier 2, we have Red Black Greymon, more specifically focused on Black War. There was some War Greys that popped up in between, but it's all mostly the same deck at this point. It's still just trying to do the same thing. So I still lumped it together, and that's about 10%. Continuing into tier 2, we have Royal Knights at 9%, Blue Flare at 8%, Bloomlord at 6%, Red Hybrids at 5%, and Belfmon at Red Hybrids was at 6%, and then Belfmon starts tier 3 at 5%. So that is your top 8 decks. And if you want to compare that to Japan's top 8 decks, they had Shine at about 16%, Royal Knights at about 12%, Red Black Greymon at about 8%, Belfmon at about 8%, Beelzemon at about 7%, Hunters at about 6%, and Red Hybrids at about 5%. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then I think their 8th one was Gaugamon at 5% or 4% as well. So for the most part, fairly similar in terms of what was topping and their overall percentage. Japan's data is a little bit different because they don't have the same exact tournament structure as us, so this is through all of their like store events what has managed to top. They had like 600 decks that was recorded. I think for ours we only had about 272 decks, so but these were out of top 16s, so that's again pretty different, but very similar in terms of what was topping, and it just goes to show some slight differences in our own personal preferences and play styles.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, it's it's not too crazy. I mean, it's not anything baffling. Like we knew the meta wasn't going to change very much going into this. Nothing new really has happened. So it's it's very, how do I say it? I mean, I think this format has been amazing. I don't know how you feel about it. I assume we kind of sentiment roughly the same. Where this format has been pretty good. I don't know. I doubt anyone can sit there and be like, no, this format was not overall healthy.
I think if we were to be stuck in any format, this is definitely one of the better ones to be stuck in. Shine definitely is the only tier 1 deck out of representation, but the fact that we had 21 playable decks at the end of the meta, Japan had about like 18 or 19 at the end of theirs, that's still just a decent amount of diversity that was able to top. And I like that amount of diversity. Sure, certain decks top more than others. That's just the natural.
It's the nature of the game. There's of
Yep.
any card game, so there's no real way to go around that.
But I think like for the overall spread of data, I think this was definitely pretty good. Yes, sure, Shine still being the only one what I defined tier 1 deck is whatever, but it wasn't to such a dominating percentage that we are used to, which I think that's the good part cuz most of the time when we see one tier 1 deck, it's usually dominating by about 30 to 35% at any given meta. And you could even go to like my last year's retrospective and some of my coverage on some of the other metas and see that data where it's just like, yeah, we usually have about 30 to 35% dominance on one deck, which this format being as long as it did, sure, people kind of got bored with Shine towards the end. And we could see that in some of like the timeline of events and what was topping and the population density of the decks that were able to get into top 16. But the fact that like it wasn't so dominant and there was room for other stuff shows that it was a pretty solid format. Like, I mean, if we're going over some of the other decks, continuing with tier 3, you had Alphamon, Ulforce, Mirage, and Beelzemon. Like, that's kind of good. Going down and continuing into the rogue category that was able to sneak a couple of wins, we had Black War Greymon OTK, Machine Germon, Security Control, Dorbic, Merva, Melga was even able to make a resurgence with the starter deck cards. I think like that was the only big shakeup is the starter deck cards actually allowing Melga to be somewhat competitive. I think after playtesting the deck, it's not exactly there where it used to be, but at least it got something to come back with.
It
Then
was
you
able to perform.
Yes. Then you have Cross Hearts, more specifically Cross 7 Superior. You even had Jessmon and Beelstar able to top in this. And like that's a pretty solid spread. The only big differences compared to Japan is they had Grandis able to top, they had Examon able to top, and then they had Rosemon able to top as well. But outside of that, it was almost all pretty much the same. Not exactly same on percentages and where they were placed, but that's that goes to show that sometimes when our card pool isn't really that much different, we're not going to get that much different results.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's kind of how it works. And they're also more willing to play newer things and drop older things compared to our format. So, where people like to stick with the same stuff as long as they can.
Yeah, I mean, Japan doesn't really play a whole lot of security control from what I noticed, versus North America, which we, for whatever reason, love
Yeah,
security
we abuse
control.
that. There are
And
for
I
some reason.
And as much as I don't like the deck, just the fact that that is still just a big like deck difference wise, like shows that we like what we prefer to play is just different than Japan. Therefore, some of our numbers are going to reflect that. Japan's a good like indicator. It's a good starting place, but it's not the rule. It's not the guide because especially going into BT14, we have a definitely different format than what they experienced with the new ban and restrictions being in place, on top of a couple of promos that we had earlier than what Japan got them format wise. Yes, we're technically getting them at around the same time, but format wise, they're getting them in BT15 and we're getting ours in BT14, which it's definitely going to shake up the BT14 format quite a lot, actually, I think. Even though it's not like a whole lot of differences, it's enough to make it interesting. But yeah, so as far as the rest of the wrap up, um, I don't really know if there's any other data that like we really need to like hardcore hit on. As far as like the timeline goes, it just shows like what deck has been populated in density, like how many of it has been winning in each of the different events. And obviously we could see that Shine definitely had the majority of the like amount of tops. That just was a no-brainer. And then right about towards the tail end of it, he just started falling off, probably because people were just not interested in playing Shine all the time, which I think is fine. It seemed like more people were actually willing and trying to pick up other decks. Like you had Royal Knights make a pretty decent resurgence. You had Blue Flare make a pretty decent resurgence. You had Greymon just stay Greymon. Greymon's always been in pretty decent population density in terms of how well he could top. So especially with all the different variants. But yeah, I think that overall BT13 was a pretty solid format, even though it was way longer than anyone reasonably wanted it to be. I think for what it was, it definitely was a good format.
I am beyond happy with it. I couldn't ask for anything more. But I am very excited to get to the next one.
Yeah, speaking of the next one, we are going to be entering BT14. So BT14 introduces the Blast Ace. Well, I mean, that's the name of the set. And it introduces the Ace Digimon, which are really interesting. They have low play costs, really good when digivolving, and on delete effects. As of right now, they don't have any inheritables. And the drawback of using these cards is the overflow mechanic. So the reason why they cost so cheap to get into is because of overflow. So you're putting a lot of the cost behind the card. So when the card is used up and it leaves the field, then overflow will trigger, giving the opponent extra memory. I think that alone, especially with the hand trappiness that it kind of feels, definitely adds a new layer and dynamic to Digimon, because a lot of people were complaining before that there was like very limited interaction, and Blast Ace to me feels like the best possible way they could have done it without it feeling like completely stupid.
Yeah, I dig the mechanic a lot. I think there's a lot of good, and they've done it tastefully to where there's nothing absurd at the moment.
I mean, we do have some pretty solid cards to start with.
I was like, yeah, but they ain't absurd. They're not like
no,
gonna
they're
destroy the game.
No, they definitely feel very good and very fair, and I think like for what they are, they're not exactly staple territory, but they're just good generic card territory. Like the only real staples that I would define that we have are literally the memory boosts and the training cards. Those are the only actual staples that I feel like Digimon has for what a staple is and where the game is headed. And now that we're finally getting the training cards, it's definitely going to speed up the game. And I think like the training cards sped up the game for Japan. I don't know how the game would be without them speed wise, because they just do so much for the deck's consistency that like they just demand 2 to 4 slots in your deck for any deck, almost no matter what, unless you're a very specific build that's running multiple different colors. Then you can't really take good advantage of them.
I think the cards are beyond absurd. Like they are way too good. Those trading cards. Um, they're fun to use, and just like you said, they do make essentially every deck that you use 50% to 80, like 50 to 100% more consistent. Like you just saying, boom, two costs. It's cost effective, and it refunds the cost way more because a lot of your level fours and fives have such absurd effects that they refund the cost and then some for using the card. So it's like they're such absurd cards, and they are definitely staples. And I believe you are doing yourself a disservice when you're creating a deck if you aren't using them in your deck. Like that's how good the training cards are.
And we really haven't had a whole lot of that in Digimon before. Like some people were saying with RBO1, we were getting a whole bunch of staple cards, and I'm just like, they're not
No,
really staple cards. They're good generic cards, but they're not true staple must run and borderline everything. And I think like memory boosts got really close, but they still weren't as cost effective as training cards. And I think like that's what's making the training cards edged out over the boosts is just the sheer efficiency of them. And from what I saw based on Japan, almost every single deck that can use them usually uses a combination of training cards and memory boosts, which I can't say the same as for any other type of card in the entire game for any deck. Granted, there are a couple of cards that have been able to reach other decks. I think like the blue stuff for the Goma package, where you're just using Gomamon and Zudo Ace, like that can be splashed into a lot of blue decks very easily. But I
yep,
still wouldn't label that as true staple territory versus the training and the boosts. And usually, from what I see in Japan, they're running like four boosts, two training. Or no, four training, two boosts. My bad.
yeah, I was like the opposite, but
So, like,
yeah,
bare minimum, that eats up six of your option slots, which you're usually not playing a whole lot of either.
yeah, exactly. Nowadays you just focused on the bodies in your deck, and the engines themselves do all the work. They're your removal, they're your spawning, they're your damage, they're everything. So it's like you don't necessarily need the options. So that's where the trainings and that they fit in just perfect because they're just there to enhance whatever the deck is doing. And they work for every deck. There's no deck that can't benefit from it. So this if you were to look at Digimon and be like, damn, what are some staples? These are the only two cards that I could be like, yes, these are staples, 100%. And they'll go in every deck for the foreseeable future until they are banned, if they ever get banned, or anything of that nature.
Yeah, and I think, like, getting I mean, it's good that the memory boost just got reprinted in
Yep.
the Resurgence booster, which made them borderline pennies. And I think that the training cards will eventually get that same treatment. They'll probably be kind of hard after the initial wave of BT14 makes its course. And then boxes probably won't be scarce, but people will just stop opening and buying them as much because the next thing is going to be coming out eventually. So the hype is going to be taken off of them. And then after a certain amount of time, that's when they're going to start spiking because they're still going to be that in demand, especially if they're better than the memory boosts. But knowing Bandai and how they generally do reprints, they'll eventually have nice alt arts to start with, and then maybe get like a nice another mass reprint somewhere. But for the time being, this is the only way to get them is inside of BT14 booster boxes, or just buy the singles online for the people who are selling them. And I definitely would get as many copies as you feel like you want based on how many decks you're going to be playing as soon as you possibly can, just to save yourself the headache because of how good these cards are.
Yeah, I think you are 100% getting a playset of every single one of them. If you're running multiple decks, or at least a playset or two of the decks you mainly run. Like if you're running red, probably buy like two playsets so that you can use them in multiple decks, and you're not like, unless you don't care about switching them out, then whatever. But like me, I know I'm going to be running them. I play every deck, so I'm going to throw him in every single deck, and so I'm going to need a bunch of copies of it.
Yeah, I don't build every single deck, but I build a lot of decks, and I definitely know I'm going to need a bunch of copies myself. I just got a whole bunch of blue memory boosts for all my blue decks because I've been lacking on those. And yeah, so it's good to it's good when Digimon is able to supply us with what we need. That very rarely ever happens when we need it, but it's nice when things do line up. Just like the movie promos. So the movie promos is going to be one of the biggest things that are going to be changing our BT14 format. We're going to have the movie promos that are coming out in the demo decks available to be able to play competitively as of November 24th, which is going to be Ukamon, the Davis. It's going to be Imperial Ace, even though that's technically not really a movie promo, but he's in the demo deck and he's a new promo, so there he is. And then it's going to be Louis, the new Tamer, and a new Vmon. And I
Mm-hmm.
think like the most relevant card is probably going to be Ukomon, just because of, Rainbow Evolution for a level 3 could be used in virtually any deck, and the fact that it rewards you for raising and it sees itself raising, so you'll just automatically gain a memory for just raising the Digimon. That's absurd. Then I know there's been some grand whispers and talks that Bloomlord is definitely going to be taking huge advantage of the card just because it is part fairy. It has a fairy in its trait. It is technically an ancient fairy, but for Bloomlord, a lot of the cards just say fairy in one of its traits, so it doesn't really matter. So that's definitely going to be a huge change versus over in Japan, where they had the LM cards for their BT14 and we don't. So the exclusion of the LM cards definitely is already going to be one meta change factor. The ban and restrictions is going to be another one. And then the inclusion of these new promos that Japan didn't have is going to be the third major change that's going to make our BT14 really interesting.
Yeah, I'm excited. I mean, I'm over here. I'm singing praise for that Ukomon, man. I love that card so much. It is a beyond absurd card. I'm excited to use the Vmon as well. I think there's going to be some applications that you can do aside from the immediate thought process. Um, I think this should be an interesting format. This is like the soft reset for the game. So, and the differences in our format compared to JP, I think, are fun. So I'm overall excited. I do want those LM cards, but um, it's okay. I think it sucks, but there's not much we can do about it. So I'm not gonna complain too much about it because we're getting other stuff. So our format's gonna be different.
Yes, because we're also getting the other movie promos as of December 8th. Those will be legal. And I have said this on Facebook before. Nobody listened to me that they were going to be in stores, and everyone was freaking out over them when certain movie theaters got them, certain movie theaters didn't. People got like massive quantities of them because they either work at a movie theater or they just talked to the manager because they had to return the packs anyway. So they were just like, no, you could just have them. We don't care. So like there was some really wonky stuff going on with the promos and the overhype on the promos, but I knew because Bandai said it, and I listened to what Bandai said, that they were going to be coming out as Tamer Party pack for December, and now we got more official confirmation that that is true, and the legality of the cards, the rest of them, will be on December 8th. It'll be very interesting to see what these cards are going to be doing. I think the majority of them is just going to be relevant for Imperial, just to boost up Imperial. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but there's some fun other things that you could do with some of the other promos. I know people were looking at something like Armadillomon for what, Chessmon. So like there's some weird applications that these can have in other areas that'll make them very fun and exciting for us to play around with.
I'm very excited for the Patamon. The Patamon plus the TK. Ooh, play a free Patamon, use the Evo, get free Evos. Come on, that's just gonna be nice. I'm
Yeah.
excited.
And then they have like other generic abilities to just help you try to gain memory. So it's not like they're bad. It's just they seem like they're more designed for the DNA stuff that's going to be coming out in BT13, but that's
Oh yeah,
BT16. That's a whiles way away. And we do have a method outside of the Tamer Party stuff, because I know based on your distributor, sometimes they get the Tamer Party stuff, sometimes they don't, which is just unfortunate for stores and players alike. But if you're really clamoring for the cards, you could always wait 8 months and get them in the Bandai Premium product, and then by 8 months down the road, we should be getting BT16, which is when the cards are going to be more relevant.
yeah, we'll be right there. I think right there for it. But I don't know. I don't. Uh, I'm not a. That's a whole different topic. I don't
Yeah,
like
we
the.
already talked about our disdain for Bandai Premium stuff, because like if you're still waiting for the Demon Lord stuff and the Diaboromon stuff, now would have been a good time to have it, but you're still going to be waiting till next year to get them. But again, hyperbole, different story for a different time that we already talked about. But I'm just saying that they at least acknowledged that
Yeah,
promos sometimes are really stupid and hard to get, and they wanted to try a little bit harder, just a teeny tiny bit, to make them more accessible.
yeah. I agree, and I think I'm happy that they're at least doing stuff. That they could just say no. This is the only time you're gonna get it. So at least they're doing something. It's not very good, but it's something.
Yeah, and there's still a ton of promos that we're missing, but again, different story for a different time. And I'm curious to see like what are the like big ramifications that these changes are going to have to our BT format or BT14 format that Japan's didn't. Like I don't know how good Imperial is going to end up being. Based on my testing, he's going to get better. Like he's definitely going to get better, but is it going to be the tier 1 spot people want him to be? Probably not. Same thing with blue hybrids. Like we got Tommy unbanned, which unleashed the force of blue hybrids, but I think like what they said on why Tommy was okay to come back is kind of true. Like there are just counters and answers to Tommy as a whole and his strategy. And I think that he's totally fine on coming back. I don't think the deck is going to be tier 1 for like looking at Japan on what we know is going to be good, and just looking at our BT13, what is still going to be good, because a lot of these decks are still going to be relevant. Like Mirage only gets better because of the training cards and the Bukamon, and then you also have the Goma and the Zudomon that you could splash in there too, just because. Then Shine, even though he did get hit, we got training cards again to boost up the consistency. And hey, it could even find Tamers, which now you're going to be trying to play Tamers more from your hands than from your security. Whatever. Not really that big of a loss. It is and it isn't. It's more of a loss for other decks, but Yellow Vaccines is definitely looking to be a new emerging good yellow deck. That deck looks very strong in terms of its overall game plan. Then you got Lugamon is going to be really, really good, just because like it's Garurumon on steroids in purple.
God,
Um,
that deck is insane, absurdly insane. I played both of these decks so far, and Luga is just crazy.
yeah, we already know that there's more Agumon stuff and Greymon stuff. So hey,
Ooh, I love it.
Greymon gets even more support. I know this is going to be the last bit of support he's going to get for a while, because it doesn't look like he's going to get anything in until BT 16. If they give us a new Black War, that would basically be the only spot that we see anything Greymon related.
I believe so. Yeah, because we're not getting anything BT15.
Yeah, so Greymon players, eat your heart out on the new
Let's
stuff.
go. Oh,
I do think this helps push War Greymon to be a more of a plausibility rather than just de facto everything being Black War and company.
yeah, I think Wargrey now has a lot more legs to stand on, but I still think the Black War is the superior deck at the current moment. I'll have to wait and
I
see.
think Wargrey, everyone's just going to try playing OTK. Like, it's just going to be doubling down on OTK Wargrey.
That's what I believe as well. I just think that Black War is just a more consistent, a better version of the deck. But that's just personal opinion. We'll see when the events happen and see what happens.
Yeah, because in my theory crafting, I was already looking at Wargrey, and I'm just like, okay, so we have Red Tie, then we have Security Tech Greymon, we have the new starter deck Metal Greymon for another Security Tech Inheritable, so that's already +3 to the Security Tech. Then we have Metal X for another Security Tech, and then so that's already 4 extra checks. So like just that alone allows
It's
you to
five.
break all 5 of the opponent's security. And then if you used X antibody, then you could use the new War Greymon to be able to give the Greymon War Greymon X antibody all of those abilities, and then gain all that memory back, and then Omnimon for game. Like it just seems like it's screaming, just let me play an OTK deck.
Yeah, you're already able to kind of do that already, so it's like
Yeah, but you needed
it's
to like do unsuspend shenanigans, and the opponent could play around that. And now this is just harder because they can't.
I mean, yeah, but I don't think it's better than just saying make even if you're not OTKing them, getting them down to one security is enough pressure to like make them do something, and then if they can't deal with what you're doing, it's more than enough. So it's like, does it really matter? I mean, I'm sure people are gonna do it because duh, why wouldn't you? Um, and give it a shot because you never know. But I think that you're doing that is basically saying I'm hoping I have everything in hand ready to go the moment I do it, and it's going to run into the same problems that the old OTK versions of the deck would do, where you just won't have all the pieces, and then you'll get them down to 1 or 0 life, and then they just stop you. Whereas, or they're able to, if they are able to clap back, which nowadays decks clap back hard. Um, so I don't foresee it being the superior version, or even it's something that does better. I do think it's going to do okay, just because at the end of the day, OTK decks steal games. If homie gets the full line perfect, he just won. There's nothing you could have done about it. Um, you pray your security saves you. If it doesn't, well, that's it. You just lost. But and that just happens. But it'll be like fringe success. It's just slightly more consistent because it has the Greymon engine. But I don't think it's as good as I'm thinking it's going to be.
I mean, who knows? It's just some new tools for Greymon to play around with. I do think at
Yeah.
the end of the day, Black War is probably going to be better, just because like there's no deck right now that does what he does in terms of the amount that he's able to A, wall out, and B, control, because there's not that much tamer hate or removal. Like that's still gonna keep him very relevant. I think with the training cards, it's gonna be a tiny bit less relevant because
Mhm.
now there's like not as much reason to play tamers, because you just play boosts and you just play training cards. And with how strong decks can be, sometimes they just need that one push, and those options give them the push while making it hard for the opponent to interact with them, because they're not leaving a tamer on the field to be taken advantage of.
Yeah, exactly. So I do I do think that you're right in that aspect that a lot of that tamer hate and stuff like that is gonna not necessarily go away, but it's not gonna be as dramatically impactful unless it's in specific matchups. But I think it's fine because that's just extra in that deck. It's not really like the main entire focus. So I don't think it doesn't hurt the deck.
No.
Uh,
But as far as other really good decks from BT14, we know that D Brigade is coming back. More specifically, trying to play with D Police, but it's D Brigade as of right now, because we don't have any other D Police cards to interact with.
yeah, it's still cool. It's a really fun deck. That's one thing I like about it, but it does get walled out pretty easily by a good chunk of stuff.
Yeah, and then what else would be remain good as far as like stuff from this format? I think like Machine German still is gonna be like Rogue always. Like it's just one of those cards that like as long as they keep making level 5 cyborgs, which we do have in this set, Machine German will always get looked at. I don't know whether he's gonna be always successful or not, but that's it's still a thing. I think Hunters is still going to be pretty prevalent just because it's still one of the stronger decks, just
Of
because of
course.
how fast it can move and set itself up.
Mirage, I think, is going to rise up in popularity again.
Yeah, even
Uh,
through his limitation that he got on the EX4
it's not
mod,
enough.
I mean, you just have to play a little bit more carefully now in terms of timing your ability to unsuspend. That's it.
Exactly. And so the better players will make it work, and it'll be just fine. Um, I also think Rosemont surprisingly has a lot of legs to stand on in this set.
Really?
I do. I do think that there's enough of the stuff that's come out that really does push the a lot of the OTK potential up. Setting up your tamers a lot faster, easier, controlling the board by making things not unsuspend,
I just
and
think at
then
that point, if you're just going to play into that engine, Bloomlord is still just better.
I think I think you're correct in that aspect, but I do like Rosemond's ability to safely OTK your opponent. Not check the security, but trash it. I think that's something that I like a lot. Um,
Yeah, but going back to like the training cards, kind of pushing a lot of other things out, I think Rosemond gets hit way harder than um, Black War Greymon in terms of its tamer removal ability. Because now, if you're just playing training cards instead of tamers, like Rosemond actually doesn't have any ability to do anything. Which is why Bloomlord I always say is better, is because it's more independent and it doesn't need the opponent to do anything to be good.
and that's true, but you can do it via your own stuff as well. You don't have to focus on their stuff because you can suspend your own stuff and their stuff.
Okay, that gives it a little bit more independence.
I like it, and in testing, it's been pretty fun, and I've been doing pretty well with it. Um, it's definitely nowhere near as good as Blue Lord. Don't get the wrong idea, but I do think that into a lot of the matchups, like for example like Lugamon and things like that, it's really not that bad. Like it's quite surprising how much you can take advantage of like D Brigade and um, Black War and things like that. How much you can bypass some of their stuff.
Yeah, now
So I do like.
I know we both have been doing a little bit of Jessmon testing,
Oof,
and
yo,
like it
they're eating good this set. Ooh,
he
yeah.
definitely, even though he's like literally not getting any like super hyper usable tools, just unlocking that level 5 really shows how strong that type of a level 5 is. I mean, granted, it's almost the exact same type of thing that Lucamon has, and Lucamon's abusing the ever living crap out of it. So I guess their logic is, well, if Lucamon has it, I guess we could give it back to Jessmon, considering Jessmon's just a worse Lugamon at this point.
It literally is. It's just an infinitely worse Lugamon, but it's still so good.
No, I think the change to the deck makes like any version of it way better. And then other decks now can try to abuse it, like Dorbikmon. Maybe they'll try to
Hmm.
work in the Sistermon, like a little bit of a Sistermon engine, just because the deck still just wants to try to OTK and multi attack, and drawing through Sistermons is not terrible.
Yeah, it's just a free body that draws cards, and you could swing with it if you don't care if you got your draw. So it's not the worst. I know that some people were using it back in the day anyway in Dorbic. So
Yeah.
I look forward to seeing what people do there. I am looking forward to testing Gallantmon via all of the trainings and things like that and see how much it benefits from it. Because
Oh, that's right.
I do think Gallantmon is one of those decks that's like always right there. You know, like it just needs something, and it's always like a something extra, and it just never feels enough, and I want to see if maybe this helps and this pushes it to where I would like it to be. I don't think it will, because I still think it's going to run into the same problems that it always has. But I am excited to see what I can do with it, especially being able to like go into like the milling aspect and doing that for free potentially, and then going up into the stacks. Like I think there's something there. I think there's some fun stuff there.
The cool thing with Gallantmon is the way Biomerge works. You can still use the cost reduction on the
Because it's the
Digivolution.
Guilmon.
Yes, because the Guilmon is digivolving, not the Tamer. Unfortunately, the training boosts don't help hybrid base decks as much, just because you can't target your Tamer to get a free evolution. If you could, that would be insane.
That'd be broken.
Yeah, I mean, hybrid decks can still work the training cards in just because they're good consistency tools, but I think like something like red hybrids, it loses a lot of its relevancy just because it probably becomes the new like gatekeeper level. So we saw at the beginning of this format, like Bloomlord was that gatekeeper level where it's just like he's not better than the top decks, but he's still significantly better than everything that's below him. And I think like Red Hybrids transitions into that same type of a role where if you reasonably can't beat Red Hybrids, then are you even a competitive deck at this point?
That makes 100% sense to me. I can agree there. I can definitely agree there because I think that if your deck cannot compete against Red Hybrid, you're probably not having a good time against any of the other meta decks anyway. So I'm very interested to see how that pans out, seeing that that's going to be the case because like Red Hybrid doesn't really get any boosts from the training boosts. Like it's not really as good, but like it's still dramatically better than a lot of other decks.
Yeah, I mean, the problem with red hybrids is they, like, I kept saying this over and over again. I firmly still believe they only have 4 option slots, like 4 tech slots, because their list needs to be very specific, and maybe the training cards just take that away. And maybe, like, there is just only one de facto way to build red hybrids, and that's kind of it. I could be wrong. I'd have to go and see, like, and test the training cards with red hybrids more specifically, but red hybrids was already a very tight list as is, and I think like that's good just because having a really cheap, accessible, hyper aggressive, tight list just makes it really easy to enter the game. Just because, oh, I want to play competitively. What do I play? Red hybrids. Oh, what's a good deck list for it? Oh, here's 46 mandatory cards. Okay. Like,
Yeah,
sure.
it makes it nice and simple. I think Red Hybrid will always be the deck. I'm just like, somebody brand new comes in, hey, go play Red Hybrid. Here you go. Because I think it's just such a good starter deck to learn how to play the game. And yes, it does kind of bypass some of the rules, but it teaches them, other mechanics like warping and then using the hybrids, but you're still playing the game kind of normally because you're digivolving, using your raising, digivolve to level 4, normal swings. So I think that Red Hybrid will be that deck that I'm always just going to recommend to like newer players. And then if they want to take it further, they can, but they're going to be playing against the odds here because there are just a lot of decks that can outright just beat it.
All right, hear me out. This is my new copium for red hybrids, and it's not even red hybrids specifically. It's more of a ancient Greymon OTK deck because now you could use the training cards to try to dig out your pieces and then make your evolution after you digivolved up
Yeah.
into your Aldemon a little bit easier because you already can use the what? You're going to be paying
3.
3 to get up into your Digimon anyway, and then you're going to pay an additional 3 to Digivolve. Now it only costs 1 to Digivolve, so like Gravity Crush, or if you have a red memory boost, pop the red memory boost. I think Gravity Crush is still the most likely answer, and then that allows you to like fully use Takato or not Takato, Takuya, to be able to OTK easier for Ancient Gray. But again, that's just pure hopium. I don't think it's gonna be that great, but it's still just a funny idea to play around with because it's a little bit more plausible and feasible now because of the training cards.
I honestly do kind of agree that Ancient Grey OTK kind of feels like it could be a lot better because it really wasn't like bad. It was just not consistent.
Oh, no. So you could stack two Agunimon promos underneath with Takuya
Yeah,
and
and
then
then
pop
Evo.
the training card Evo for 0 into Ancient. There we go. Figured it out. Nailed it.
I was like, yeah, you just gotta live that long to set that up. But yeah, if you
And you need the specific cards in your trash. So
exactly, you
like
gotta live that
again,
long and then set up in trash. But hey, you never know.
yeah,
You
again,
never
not
know.
saying it was feasible. It's just that goes to show like what these training cards are even capable of. Even for like some of the weaker decks, like it could just start making them a lot more viable because of the consistency boost and the just ease of evolution, which I still think Digimon like Bandai is kind of afraid of, but they're also like not afraid of it as much as they used to be, because I think like with the training cards, like there's and how strong cards have gotten, we really don't need cards like HPD in the game anymore because like, oh, we could just have free evolutions anyway. And a card like HPD actually is going to be making things worse because it's just like, oh, so we already have free evolutions that's gaining us memory for evolving for meeting the specific conditions. We already reduced that free evolution to gain us even more memory. So now we could reduce it even further to like it just feels like a card like HPD just does not need to exist in the game at all anymore.
It feels like if you're when you see HPD, it's kind of like activating cheat codes. That's literally what it feels like. It feels like you just get to cheat, and your opponent just has to sit there and be like, "Wow, that's legal." Yeah,
Yeah,
just like
and the training cards already feel like cheating as is.
yes, they do. They do feel absolutely absurd. So a card that literally it is borderline cheating. Hidden potential is borderline cheating. Like I don't know what people. That card is crazy, dude. Especially in like most green decks where you want your cards to be suspended for to get extra effects. You're literally not hurting by using the effect ever. The cost to suspend your thing is not a cost. It's a benefit. So like, it's so stupid. I can't stand that card. You can call me a hater all you want, but I hate hidden potential discovery.
Yeah, I know people will be like, "No, don't pick on green. Green hasn't really been
Green's fine.
good. Green's fine. Green like next set green gets even more good stuff to play around with. Green's fine, trust me. Cuz especially like it really seems like Bandai's afraid of green and yellow more specifically, and why they're very hesitant on making anything good for them is because like they could very easily break the entire game, because they have in the past, uh just using the base mechanics that the cards just want to play into.
I I I hate it. I hate that they do it because I love yellow as a color. I love like I can't wait for to play this angel deck or vaccine, whatever you want to call it. Yellow vaccine, good
It's
stuff.
yellow vaccine good
Um,
stuff.
I'm very excited to play that, but it's one of those things where it teeters very close to being just absurdly annoying because being able to just manipulate your security, being able to look at your security period is just not fair. Being able to know what's in your security and being like, okay, I can play around this or play through this or oh, I have like three options. I'm golden. I don't care what you do to me, homie. And then it gives you basically the mental freedom to just be lax and not fear what your opponent is going to do. Whereas then on the turn of green, for example, they just you bypass all the rules of the game. I'm gonna pay three. No, I've never paid three to evolve almost ever, almost ever in that deck. So it's like, did the two colors do things that bypass the game's traditional rules, and it feels like it's cheating but they're hampered by the minuscule effects that they have from their engine going up into their level sixes, and now we're kind of getting where they're kind of evening out, and now they're a lot better. Like Bloom feels absurd right now. I haven't gotten to play Vaccine yet because I don't have my Angemons yet, but or my Patamons actually. I need two more, but
Vaccine feels like what black tries to be, because I always associate black with like the anti-meta color, because that's kind of what it feels like. It just has a lot of mechanics that say like, no, you're not trying to do what you're trying to do. And I think like Yellow Vaccine definitely is taking up that mantle as like the big anti-meta deck, because it has two relevant floodgates that are both vaccine traded, that
yeah,
both
Pillow.
it doesn't care about. So I'm just like, oh, that's kind of neat and interesting. And then just hosing on viruses for like not borderline zero reason, it's a lore reason, but hosing
Yeah,
on viruses when a lot of the most relevant stuff is virus based, it's like, oh, that also is kind of like a very anti-meta thing for it to do.
the best removal. Just place it. Don't remove it. Don't set. Just place it. Place it to the bottom or top. That's beyond absurd. It's actually no. It goes straight to the bottom of their security. You don't get that choice. But that's that effect will always be absurd.
Yeah, I mean, they
Not
also have a jamming egg. I think jamming eggs are also just really good.
broken.
Yeah, jamming eggs are
Broken.
like, we can see this with blue already, that Bokomon is already, or Bukamon? Yeah.
Yes, it feels
Bukamon is gonna be,
insane.
yes. And like, it's the best blue egg for a reason. Like, blue already has the best natural card draw in the game, because that's like blue's core mechanic. Because like, I have this like mental association with each aspect of the field goes to a different color. So black is the
Mhm.
deck, purple is the trash, green is the raising area, red is the field, yellow is the security, blue is the hand. Like, I have that mental association that like that, okay, so if I want to draw lots of cards, blue is the color I want to play. And the fact that they also just interact with source stripping to guarantee that their stack is going to be larger than the opponent's more often than not, or if they just don't have anything and they're bricking, then they just take advantage of that even more for free. It feels so good. And seeing yellow get kind of something like that it has easier access of using, is kind of nice, because now I could play yellow maybe a little bit more aggressively than what the opponent might be thinking.
Yeah, I'm very excited to play this deck. I think it's going to be very fun. I don't think it's going to be broken, but I think it's going to be very fun and very good. And people won't know how to, at least at the beginning, they won't know how to play around it. So they'll probably get punished pretty hard from Magnum Angemon Ace and that kind of stuff at the beginning until people get used to the Ace and all that other fun stuff. But I think the deck is very good. Seraphimon is a house of a card. I love it. I love Seraphimon. Being able to evolve for free into Seraphimon is crazy. Um, that's just crazy, dude. Just recovery one, whenever security's added, security +1, and then you -7,000 to something on the board. That's pretty insane.
So,
Uh,
I know, like, on the topic of yellow, what are your thoughts of security control in this set? Because you already had Magnamon, or Magna Angemon from
Now you get the
BT1 that on
Ace.
play recover, and now you basically have a second one on top of more Seraphimons that could recover, and then you still have Shadow Seraphimon that you would want to use to really punish the opponent for attacking into security, on top of like, you're probably the only deck in the game left actually using security bombs. So like, I don't
Yeah,
know. I know there's like a lot of trash security type of effects, and then we have really good removal on climbing up our Digimon. But like, what do you think that is going to happen to security control this format?
I think they're gonna adapt and add like the Ace card. The Magna Angemon Ace is a no-brainer. That card is absurd. It's the old Magna Angemon except it has removal
And it costs
built in.
less.
Exactly. So it's just dramatically better. So of course they're gonna throw this in the thing. It also is a simultaneously they can do things like promote like a jamming, swing jamming if they are using the jamming if they want to lean towards aggression, which they probably won't. They'll probably still use all the old uh, stuff, but if they lean towards the aggression, they can use the Patamon to then filter their security. I think there's going to be more. I don't think it's going to be dramatically better, like to the point where we'll see it a lot more, just because a lot of decks can just kill them before they've even had a chance. Like this deck, yes, in theory, it's absurd because you're able to do so much, but there's still a lot of setup that's involved in that. Whereas, like, let's just go Fenrir Lugamon for example.
Yeah, like what does
Like,
security control do against 6 bodies that were spawned onto the
th-
field for
you
free?
you chaos deck. Well, you hit one of them. What about the other six? Like, so it's like it's I just don't foresee it being a problem. Like, what does security control do to okay, the deeper game? They spawn like 100 bodies. You're not stopping 100 bodies like
Not to
that at
mention
once.
they're all cheap, so it's not like there was a huge investment on Deeper Gate's part.
Yeah, and it's just I just don't think that there's a lot and the decks that hit hard, they hit so hard and so absurdly hard that it doesn't matter. And the removal that like security control has usually DP related. There's decks like Black or Gray just bypass it, being able to just say I'm immune to DP reduction. Um, and Yuya just being able to say no, I'm immune to your options as well. Like
Yeah, I
so,
think it'll have a spot because, like any
oh yeah, it'll
OTK
be up
deck,
there still.
yeah, like any OTK based deck, it always can just steal games for like borderline no reason. And I feel like this is just the inverse where it'll steal games because people just won't know how to play against it, or they're like still kind of unfamiliar with how to play against it. And even against like certain decks, like it like all decks now has really good matchups and really bad matchups.
Yeah, I think you're right there. I think we'll probably see a bit more of it because of just how good the cards are, and being able to memory or not memory, security manipulate is insane. Like that alone, especially in security control's eyes, they don't have to run the TK to be able to look at their security.
Yeah,
That's
they have other
that's
ways.
that's insane. Like just be like for free, I'm gonna look at my security.
Yeah,
Mm,
that's why I think a lot of
okay.
security control players are probably going to end up shifting to yellow vaccine, just because maybe now they want to play a real deck. Not that I'm saying like security control's not a real deck, it's just I hate it. So,
I
therefore, it is
understand.
not a real deck.
I don't enjoy playing against it. I understand why people play against it. It's I don't want to say the easy way out because it kind of isn't, but it is because it requires way more mental fortitude to sit there and actively choose to stall the games out because they won't tell you that that's what they're doing, but that's what they're doing. That's what the deck is built for. Like it's meant to get your opponent to either get frustrated and make mistakes or go to the point where you just deck them out and you win by via deck out. And some people like that. You are welcome to like that. That's your prerogative. It's not fun to deal with. You are more. I know you guys know that it's not fun to deal with. You guys might be having fun playing it, which is crazy to me, but to each their own. Um, but I think that you're right in that aspect that it just makes more sense to lean towards yellow vaccine because they still can do all the same shenanigans they're doing, but now they actually have a way to be proactive and not just sit there um, and hope that Magna Angemon carries them through the games.
Yeah, because I
And
think like with the direction that Digimon has been, it's always been a pretty proactive game versus a reactive game. We just see this like even going back to what we just said with Bloom versus Rose. Like Rose is more reactive, where Bloom is more proactive. Even though Rose
Mhm.
has some preactive stuff or proactive stuff, like it's still more it benefits more from reactive, and
Yeah,
that's not
it's
just
definitely more
not.
mid range.
Yeah, and that's not necessarily the best of strategies to lean towards or into.
Not in this format for sure.
No, and I think like we already know what's coming out in the future, and things are only going to get faster. Mostly just because of a couple of small design mistakes, I feel like. But right now, I think BT14 is going to be a really fun environment to play in. I wish we had more like actual competitive events. I know we have the Ultimate Cup, which me and Mark talked about last time with alternate formats, and I think like what they're doing for Ultimate Cup this time around is pretty nice, but it would have been nice to have like this would have been the format where DC Cups would have been very nice to have, like just it's not a regional, it doesn't have the same regional feel, but it's still competitive Digimon and you're still getting rewarded with different prizing. I feel like this would have been the format for DC, but it also is going to be coming out around the holiday times, and then unfortunately with how Bandai's release cycle is, and we already talked about how messed up that is. We only have about like a month to 2 months of this format before it's gone, and we don't even have any real competitive outlet for it. So as far as like competitive event data, there's not going to be too much. I think there's like what, a total of 5, 6 events that
Six.
are
Yes.
6, yeah, that are actually going to be like regional level stuff for competitive main Digimon. So it's not like there's a whole lot that we're going to be reporting on competitively. So a lot of what we're going to be talking about with BT14 going forward is going to be from the more like playtesty kind of side of things. Especially since certain decks, it's probably good to get in now, especially if you are trying to play at a competitive level, because some of these decks won't go away in the future. Like Lugamon is still going to be good, and we already know that Nationals is going to be in EX5 format, which EX5 is definitely going to be a very interesting thing when we get around there. And I don't know if Bandai's going to change the game again with maybe like an emergency ban or an extra ban or restriction based on Japanese feedback, or maybe they'll do the crazy thing and actually take English feedback into consideration. I know it's a hope, it's a dream, but who
One day.
knows? I'm not saying that there's going to be one. It's just that there could be a lot of changes to EX5, and there's still time before we get there. But for now, we can enjoy BT14 for what it is. It looks like it's going to have a lot to offer for a lot of new and returning decks. Just looking at the set, it feels more like an update set rather than a set that's actually introducing a whole lot of new stuff. Because, like, what? We got Greymon support in red. Cool. We've had Greymon for a while. We got Bloom support, or like plant fairy vegetation support in green. Cool. Still already had that. Blue is store stripping. Again, nothing special there. Then purple is where Lugamon comes in. That's like the only new thing. Yellow is yellow vaccine, which we kind of started in BT13, and like yeah, it's just getting better, taking up that more recovery side of things rather than the removal side of things, and trying to use your security as an extra resource to push damage and aggression. Then you have what? Oh, black. Black is D Brigade.
Black, yeah.
So like that's already something we already had. So like it doesn't feel like there's that many new things, but I think the trend that we're seeing is they're leaning away from archetypes and they're leaning heavier into tribes. So you could say that block 2 was the block of archetypes, and block 3 is going to be the block of tribes, where they care more about their traits rather than having Greymon in their name, having Shoutmon in their name. Like, or just being like, oh, this fits inside of the save functionality, therefore it is hunters. Like, it definitely feels like the design for tribes is the focus of what block 3 is going to be, and I'm totally here for that, because I think tribal synergies are way healthier than archetype based synergies, just from a game design standpoint. Like, there's more things that you could do with a tribe than you can with an archetype.
I wholeheartedly agree. I think this was like a soft reboot for the game, not necessarily a full one like BT12 kind of was, where it felt like a lot of things just got a lot of big updates and a lot of changes to how they fundamentally play. But like this was a okay, let's reevaluate how we design the cards and make them more not necessarily generic, but more usable in a multitude of ways. So I do like that a lot. I think it's more interesting that way. Allows for more deck creativity and expression. So I'm all for it. I'm very excited to see what people come up with. I'm excited to see what I come up with. It's going to be a good time.
Yeah, I know I'm still working on a lot of my builds. Like, I haven't been pumping them out as fast as I usually have, just because it does require more thought going into what these decks can do because of just the sheer amount of tools that they have. And I'm not saying it's like overwhelming. It's just I want to make sure that I do my like as much due diligence as I possibly can with the time I have allotted to me to be able to make what I feel like would be the best possible result. And right now, like, I feel like I'm really close with Imperial, and my list is probably going to look very different from a lot of people's lists just because of like the testing and the focus and like where my math brain comes in. I'm not saying like my brain is math, but just what I'm choosing to focus on with Imperial will be different than what other people are expecting. Cuz I'll spoil a little bit. Um I am looking at the movie promos and I'm not looking at Vmon.
Interesting. Okay. I think I've gotten close with two decks. I think Bloomlord is there. I mean, I have a 100% win rate right now with 10 games so far. So I think something is good there. Um, I'm I'm at the point where I really like my black or gray deck after the updates. I really like where I'm at with it. Um, so those two, I got three decks then because Mirage is basically, I think I'm basically done
Yeah,
with
I
it.
think some decks were definitely easier to update than others.
And then the next one I think I'm gonna hard work on is Gallantmon because I my Greymon deck got my because when I make decks I try my hardest to test them and then at bare minimum I want to do 15 games bare minimum and if I can't get at least 60% or above win rate I don't tell anyone about it and it just goes into the trash and then I try another one and
I'm not exactly there with that because I know certain decks, like, I know Imperial is not going to have that 60% win rate, but I do know people are going to be wanting and asking it. And that's why, like, I'm like trying to figure out the parts and pieces that I feel comfortable with saying I think this is as good as I can get with Imperial based on the format that we're going to be in. Because I know like a lot of people are really excited for like the poop meme decks, but they're still just meme decks at the end of the day. And I don't
yeah
necessarily think those will get to the 60% either.
no of
But
course
people still want them. And like that's just the fun
I
part
think
is
I think for decks like that, I don't mind it as much. Like
yeah.
there is not like there it doesn't really matter. But like for like my decks that I'm like, okay, I want to bring these into tournaments.
Oh, for
Uh,
tournament decks, yeah, you want as best as a win
I'm
rate as you
sitting
possibly
there
can.
right now. I can say two of them are leaning towards being very absurdly good, and then I haven't gotten to test the third one as much. And then Gallimon I haven't gotten to even mess with at all. So I'll get those, and then once I'm done, I can throw them up in our newly created deck channel. So and get those going because I already
Yeah.
got the Bloom Lord up there. So and that deck is fuego. I promise that deck is so much fun.
Yeah, I'll definitely be looking at some of the tools and seeing what spice can be added, because I was looking at a new world and I was just like, this looks, such a niche card, but like sometimes they just accidentally make things more playable than they should be, and that's the fun part of
Oh
like
yeah.
like just deck building and exploring. And I think that's what's like really interesting about more trait based design, is because it opens that up way more than archetypes ever could, because archetypes are asking for more specific things. Like that's why I always say Machine Germon's a deck that's always going to be in the back of people's brains, because anytime they print a new sideboard, boom, Machine Germon. That's the first thing they'll think of. And
Yep.
I think like right
Anything with
now,
cyborg or machine.
yep,
Boom.
and that's where a lot of plants, fairies, and vegetations are with Bloomlord, and I think like that just makes things really fun and interesting. And like yes, it could accidentally break some things, but that's up to Bandai to figure out how to learn and grow from those types of mistakes, and even to be able to experiment and play around with that type of design space to begin with. So I'm really optimistic towards BT14 as a whole and as a format, even though it is going to be a little on the shorter side. And I think like the deck that I'm leaning more towards is probably Lucamon, just because I'm a filthy blue player. I like my multiple swings, big damage, multiple attacks, just lots of fun things happening, drawing lots of cards, and Lucamon kind of fits almost all of those niches, while also just so happening to be a dog, extra benefits. But
Exactly.
uh but that's the deck that I'm most excited about. What's the deck that you're most excited about?
Honestly, it's probably yellow vaccine. I'm not gonna front. I really like the idea of it. It's that or Bloomlord, because I am just having a blast with Bloomlord.
Okay, okay. Two very, very good decks. So, I guess if do you have a question to end things off on for the listeners? Because I know you wanted to try to introduce a question more often than not. I know
Yes,
usually you
sir.
want to try to do it at the beginning just to get them, thinking throughout the episode. But better late than never, I guess.
So then the question I'm going to pose to the audience today is, what do you guys think is going to be the meta? We have a general idea, but that's just us. I want to hear some opinions. I want to hear some fire stuff. I want to hear some spice. I want to hear some interesting opinions there. Drop
Outside
it
of
down in
poop.
the comments.
Yeah,
Yeah,
outside
oh
of
yeah.
poop. Because please,
No,
like,
hey
whenever I
man,
ask for deck recommendations, everyone's like, can you play the poop deck? I'm like, no, I don't
man.
like the
If
poop
you
deck.
got the spice, I'm down to see the spice. If you can throw it down, and I'm down to see what it is. But it's definitely not the first thing I want to be picking up. So you're gonna need to convince me. But I am down to be convinced. Drop it down in the comments, and I'm more than happy to read them all. I do read almost all the comments, almost all the time. So, and I do reply to most of them. So if you do drop a comment, I will most likely be replying to it.
Yep. But I think that is all of the time that we have today. I want to thank everyone for listening, because it always means the world to me knowing that you made it all the way to the end. And if you want to help support the podcast, please feel free to share it with others on various social media platforms. Make sure to also leave that like, rating, review, follow, subscribe on whatever platform of your choosing that you're actively listening on. And I want to thank everyone once again, and we will see you next time.